Watch this and laziness will never be your fault again. Have you ever found yourself staring at a blank screen, the cursor blinking with an almost mocking rhythm, while a mountain of tasks looms, unaddressed? Or perhaps you've felt that familiar, heavy inertia settle in, a resistance so profound it feels like a physical barrier against action. We've all been there, caught in the quiet, often shameful, grip of what we label as laziness. It's a word that carries so much weight, a judgment we often cast upon ourselves, a perceived failing of character. We tell ourselves we are not disciplined enough, not driven enough, not enough. But what if this persistent, debilitating inaction isn't a simple moral failing, a character flaw to be lamented or overcome through sheer force of will? What if the very concept of laziness as we understand it is a profound misunderstanding, a misdiagnosis of a far more complex human experience? This script is not about finding quick fixes or motivational hacks. It's about embarking on a deeper exploration, a journey into the very roots of why we sometimes find ourselves paralyzed, unable to move forward. We'll question the label itself, this ubiquitous term that often serves more as an accusation than an explanation. We'll delve into the spaces where motivation seems to vanish, where ambition falters, and where the simple act of beginning feels like an insurmountable Everest. The aim here is not to absolve ourselves of responsibility, but to understand the intricate interplay of forces, internal and external, psychological and existential, that contribute to this pervasive human experience. We'll move beyond the simplistic narrative of just do it and venture into a more nuanced, compassionate, and ultimately more illuminating understanding of why we sometimes don't. This is an invitation to re-examine a fundamental aspect of our lives, to peel back the layers of self-recrimination and discover what truly lies beneath. Prepare to question everything you thought you knew about why you don't do the things you know you should. Let us begin by dismantling the very foundation of our understanding of inaction. The term laziness itself is a linguistic construct, a label we apply to a complex set of internal states and external pressures. It's a generalization that often obscures the nuanced reasons behind our inability to act. Consider, for instance, the profound impact of what psychologists call decision fatigue. Our capacity for making choices, for exerting self-control, is a finite resource, much like a muscle that tires with overuse. By the time we've navigated a day filled with countless micro-decisions, what to wear, what to eat, how to respond to an email, whether to take the stairs or the elevator, our willpower reserves can be depleted. Consequently, when faced with a significant task that requires sustained effort, we may find ourselves utterly drained, incapable of summoning the necessary energy, not out of a lack of desire, but out of sheer cognitive exhaustion. This isn't a moral failing, it's a physiological and psychological reality. Furthermore, the environment in which we operate plays a crucial role. Are the conditions conducive to focused work, or are they a constant barrage of distractions? A workspace cluttered with notifications, competing demands, and a lack of clear structure can actively undermine our ability to engage with a task. The absence of immediate, tangible rewards for effort can also be a significant deterrent. When the anticipated outcome feels distant or uncertain, the internal motivation to bridge the gap between the present moment and that future reward can wane considerably. This is particularly true when the task itself is perceived as arduous or unpleasant. The inherent nature of the work, its perceived difficulty or lack of intrinsic interest, can create a powerful psychological resistance, a subconscious avoidance mechanism designed to protect us from discomfort or potential failure. Another crucial layer is the presence of underlying anxiety or fear. Often, what appears as laziness is, in fact, a sophisticated form of avoidance. The fear of not performing well, the dread of criticism, or the apprehension of encountering obstacles can be so potent that the mind opts for the perceived safety of inaction. It's a paradoxical situation. We avoid acting because we fear the consequences of acting, and in doing so, we often create the very negative outcomes we sought to escape. This is not merely about a lack of effort, it's about a deeply ingrained coping mechanism that prioritizes emotional self-preservation over task completion. Consider, too, the insidious nature of what psychologists refer to as learned helplessness. This psychological state, first observed in animal studies, occurs when an individual repeatedly experiences aversive stimuli they cannot control. Eventually, they cease trying to escape or avoid the stimuli, even when opportunities to do so arise. Applied to human experience, this can manifest as a deep-seated belief that our efforts are futile, that no matter how much we try, the outcome will remain unchanged. This can stem from past failures, particularly those that felt beyond our influence. When faced with a challenging task, a person who has internalized learned helplessness might not even attempt it, not because of a lack of desire, but because they have, on a fundamental level, learned that trying is pointless. It's a form of self-sabotage born not of malice, but of a deeply ingrained, albeit maladaptive, survival mechanism. This is profoundly different from mere inertia. It's an act of surrender born from perceived futility. Furthermore, the modern landscape of productivity often cultivates an environment ripe for this kind of paralysis. The constant influx of information, the pressure to multitask, and the glorification of perpetual busyness can lead to a state of cognitive overload. Our brains, designed for more focused, sequential processing, become overwhelmed by the sheer volume and velocity of stimuli. This can create a paradoxical effect where, in an attempt to manage everything, we end up doing nothing. The sheer magnitude of the perceived workload, coupled with the fractured attention spans fostered by our digital lives, can make the prospect of tackling any single task feel like trying to drink from a fire hose. It's not that we don't want to engage, it's that the very structure of our information environment makes deep, sustained engagement incredibly difficult, leading to a retreat into inaction as a form of self-preservation against overwhelming sensory input. This is a far cry from simple indolence. It is a reaction to an environment that actively erodes our capacity for sustained focus. Another critical aspect to consider is the role of perfectionism. For many, what masquerades as laziness is actually an intense fear of not meeting impossibly high standards. The anticipation of producing something flawed or imperfect can be so paralyzing that the individual delays starting altogether. The blank page becomes a mirror reflecting their perceived inadequacies, and the fear of falling short of an idealized outcome prevents them from even beginning the creative or productive process. The internal dialogue might be, if I can't do it perfectly, it's better not to do it at all. This is not about a lack of will, but an overabundance of self-imposed pressure, a sophisticated defense mechanism against perceived judgment, whether from others or from oneself. The internal critic becomes so loud that it drowns out the impulse to act, creating an apparent inertia that is, in reality, a highly charged internal battle. Finally, let's examine the concept of task aversion. Some activities are intrinsically unpleasant. They might be tedious, boring, or emotionally draining. Our natural inclination, hardwired for survival and well-being, is to seek pleasure and avoid pain. When faced with a task that triggers this aversion, our brains will naturally seek alternatives that offer more immediate gratification or less discomfort. This is not necessarily a conscious choice to be lazy, but a deeply ingrained biological response. Think of the mundane chore, the difficult conversation, or the complex report that requires wading through dense material. The immediate feeling of dread or disinterest associated with these tasks can create a powerful urge to procrastinate, to find something, anything, more appealing to do. This aversion isn't a sign of weakness, it's a fundamental aspect of our motivational architecture, designed to steer us towards activities that are perceived as beneficial or away from those that are perceived as detrimental to our immediate comfort or survival. Let's shift our focus now to the subtle but powerful influence of our internal narrative on our capacity for action. Beyond the conscious decisions and external pressures, there exists a constant stream of self-talk, a running commentary that shapes our perception of ourselves and our capabilities. When this internal dialogue is dominated by self-doubt, by a narrative of inadequacy, or by a belief that we are inherently flawed in our ability to complete tasks, it can create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Consider how often we might preface an attempt with phrases like, "I'm not good at this," or "this is going to be really hard for me." These pronouncements, seemingly innocuous, can subtly undermine our resolve before we even begin. They prime our minds to seek out evidence that confirms this negative self-assessment, making us more likely to notice setbacks, dismiss successes, and ultimately, retreat from engagement. This is not simply a matter of being pessimistic, it's about the way our internal language actively constructs our reality. The narrative we tell ourselves about our ability to do something can, in a very real sense, become the very reason we cannot. It's a form of psychological framing, where the lens through which we view a task dictates our response to it. If the frame is one of inherent difficulty or personal limitation, the energy required to overcome those perceived barriers can feel astronomical. Building upon this, consider the profound impact of unmet needs on our drive to engage in demanding activities. When our fundamental human needs, for safety, for connection, for a sense of purpose, or even for adequate rest and nourishment are not being met, our capacity for sustained effort on external tasks is significantly diminished. Imagine trying to focus on a complex project when you are experiencing chronic stress, emotional isolation, or a lack of basic physical comfort. Our biological and psychological systems are designed to prioritize survival and well-being. If these foundational elements are precarious, the energy and cognitive resources that would typically be directed towards productivity are instead consumed by the urgent, albeit often subconscious, need to address these unmet needs. It's akin to trying to build a sturdy structure on an unstable foundation. The entire edifice is compromised. Therefore, what appears as a lack of drive might, in fact, be a signal that deeper, more fundamental aspects of our lives require attention. This is not about shirking responsibility, but about recognizing that our capacity to perform is inextricably linked to our overall state of being. Furthermore, let's explore the often overlooked influence of environmental disconnect. In our increasingly digitized and often urbanized lives, many of us experience a growing detachment from natural rhythms and processes. The constant, artificial stimulation of screens and the predictable, controlled environments of our homes and offices can create a subtle but persistent disconnect from the natural world, which has historically provided grounding and a sense of biological attunement. This disconnect can manifest as a general feeling of restlessness, an inability to settle into focused work, or a pervasive sense of unease that makes sustained effort feel elusive. The lack of exposure to natural light, fresh air, and the slower, more organic pace of nature can subtly deplete our vitality and our capacity for deep engagement. It's as if we've lost a vital source of energetic replenishment, leaving us feeling perpetually drained and less capable of mustering the sustained focus required for complex tasks. This isn't about romanticizing nature, but about acknowledging the deep biological and psychological roots of our connection to the natural world and how their absence can impact our daily functioning. Conversely, consider the subtle but potent effects of unacknowledged ambivalence. Sometimes, the very tasks we perceive ourselves as being lazy about are ones we have a complex, perhaps even contradictory, relationship with. We might intellectually understand the importance of a task, yet harbor a deep-seated, perhaps unconscious, resistance to it due to its association with past negative experiences, its perceived threat to our identity, or its potential to disrupt our current comfort zone. This internal conflict, this state of being pulled in opposing directions, can create a powerful inertia. The mind, caught in this tug-of-war, may resort to an action as a way of avoiding a definitive commitment to either path, thereby preserving a sense of equilibrium, however uncomfortable. It's not that we can't do the task, it's that a part of us, for reasons we may not fully grasp, is actively, albeit subtly, resisting it. This internal dissonance can be a significant, yet often hidden, barrier to progress, a silent sabotage that manifests as a perceived inability to simply get started. Let us now consider the subtle yet pervasive influence of temporal perception on our engagement with tasks, a factor often overlooked when discussing an action. Our subjective experience of time is not a fixed, objective constant. It warps and bends based on our emotional state, our anticipation, and our engagement with the present moment. When faced with a task that we perceive as looming, distant, or interminable, time can stretch out, making the effort required seem far greater than it might actually be. Conversely, when we are engrossed in an activity we find stimulating or enjoyable, time can seem to vanish. This distortion can lead to a profound sense of overwhelm. A project with a distant deadline might feel so far off that the urgency to begin is minimal, fostering a procrastination cycle. The sheer expanse of time available can paradoxically breed inaction, as the perceived distance between now and completion dilutes the present motivation. Now, consider how this applies when you face a task with an abstract or ill-defined endpoint. The lack of a clear finish line, a concrete marker of progress, can make it difficult to gauge momentum, leading to a feeling of perpetual motion without actual advancement, which in turn can foster a subtle despair and a retreat from engagement. Building on this, it's crucial to examine the role of cognitive load management in our ability to initiate and sustain action. Our brains possess a limited capacity for processing information and executing complex mental operations. When we are bombarded with an overwhelming amount of data, competing priorities, or intricate instructions, our cognitive resources become strained. This overtaxing of our mental faculties can lead to a state of paralysis, where the sheer effort required to simply process the demands of a task feels insurmountable. It's not a lack of desire to act, but a genuine depletion of the mental energy necessary for effective engagement. Consider, for instance, trying to assemble a piece of furniture with poorly written instructions and a multitude of similarly shaped parts. The mental effort involved in deciphering the steps, identifying the correct components, and sequencing the actions can become so demanding that the entire endeavor feels exhausting before it even truly begins, often leading to abandonment. This cognitive overload can create a protective shutdown, a mechanism to prevent further depletion. Furthermore, let's delve into the impact of social comparison and perceived expectations. In our hyper-connected world, we are constantly exposed to curated representations of others' productivity and success. This can foster an environment where we compare our own efforts, often against idealized or incomplete portrayals, leading to feelings of inadequacy. When we perceive that others are effortlessly achieving more, or that our own efforts fall short of an invisible, socially constructed benchmark, it can dampen our motivation. The fear of not measuring up, of being seen as less capable or diligent, can create a silent pressure that, paradoxically, leads to withdrawal. Now, think about a situation where you're collaborating on a project, and you feel that your contributions are not as valuable or as insightful as those of your peers. This sense of falling behind or not meeting an unspoken standard can be a powerful deterrent to active participation, making you hesitant to contribute for fear of highlighting your perceived shortcomings. This internalizes a sense of competition that can stifle genuine engagement. Another critical layer to explore is the influence of sensory and environmental stimuli on our capacity for sustained focus. Our environments are not neutral backdrops, they actively shape our internal states and our ability to engage with tasks. Consider the impact of ambient noise, lighting conditions, or even the physical layout of a space. A chaotic or overly stimulating environment can fragment attention and create a constant sense of distraction, making it incredibly difficult to enter a state of deep work. Conversely, an environment that is too monotonous or lacking in subtle cues can lead to boredom and a wandering mind. Think about trying to concentrate on a complex report in a room with constant, unpredictable noises, a dripping faucet, intermittent traffic sounds, or distant conversations. These small intrusions, while seemingly minor, can disrupt the flow of thought, requiring continuous mental effort to re-establish focus. This constant re-engagement, this battle against external distractions, can be incredibly draining, leaving one feeling depleted and less inclined to persist with the task. It's not a lack of willpower, but a direct consequence of an environment that actively undermines cognitive focus. Now, let's consider the subtle influence of unarticulated emotional burdens on our capacity for action. Beyond the tangible stressors, we often carry a weight of unresolved feelings, anxieties about the future, regrets about the past, or a pervasive sense of melancholy that colors our present. These emotional undertones, though not always consciously recognized, can sap our energy and diminish our motivation. Imagine a situation where a significant relationship has recently ended, or a cherished hope has been dashed. The lingering sadness or disappointment can create a pervasive fatigue, making even simple tasks feel like Herculean efforts. It's as if a portion of our mental and emotional bandwidth is perpetually occupied by processing this internal emotional landscape, leaving fewer resources available for external demands. This isn't about being unwilling to act. It's about the sheer exhaustion that comes from carrying an invisible emotional load, a quiet drain on our vital reserves. Building on this, a crucial layer of understanding involves the impact of stagnation in personal growth. When individuals feel stuck in a rut, lacking new challenges or opportunities for development, a sense of ennui can set in. This isn't simply boredom, it's a deeper dissatisfaction stemming from a perceived lack of progress or forward momentum in one's life. Consider an individual who has been in the same role for years, with no avenues for advancement or skill development. The routine, while perhaps comfortable, can become a breeding ground for apathy. The absence of novel stimuli, or the anticipation of future learning, can lead to a diminished drive to engage in activities that require effort, as the inherent reward of growth and mastery is absent. This feeling of being on a plateau, where effort seems unlikely to yield meaningful change, can foster a retreat into passive states, a surrender to the perceived lack of opportunity for personal evolution. Furthermore, let's examine the role of misaligned values and purpose. When the tasks we are expected to perform, or the goals we set for ourselves, do not resonate with our core values or sense of purpose, a subtle but powerful resistance can emerge. Think about someone who deeply values creativity and innovation being assigned to a role that is purely administrative and repetitive. The dissonance between their intrinsic motivations and the demands of their work can create a significant internal conflict. This misalignment doesn't necessarily manifest as overt rebellion, but often as a quiet withdrawal of engagement, a lack of investment, and a general inability to muster enthusiasm. The energy required to force oneself to act against one's fundamental beliefs can be immense, leading to what appears as laziness but is, in reality, a profound disconnect from one's authentic self, and a resistance to actions that feel inauthentic or contradictory to one's deepest sense of meaning. Consequently, consider the impact of unaddressed physical discomfort or chronic pain. While we often frame inaction in psychological or motivational terms, the body's signals are paramount. Persistent physical discomfort, whether from an injury, an illness, or simply the cumulative effects of lifestyle, can significantly impair our capacity for action. Imagine trying to tackle a demanding project when you are experiencing a persistent headache or back pain. The physical sensations themselves can be so distracting and draining that the mental energy required to initiate and sustain effort is severely compromised. This isn't a matter of willpower, it's a physiological reality where the body's need for rest and relief takes precedence. The brain, attuned to these signals of distress, may interpret the discomfort as a directive to cease activity, leading to what is perceived as laziness, but is in fact a biological imperative to protect the body from further strain. This fundamental need for physical well-being directly influences our capacity to engage with tasks that require sustained physical or mental exertion. Now, consider how the perceived lack of autonomy in our daily lives can foster a subtle but potent form of inertia. When individuals feel that their actions are dictated by external forces, rigid schedules, demanding superiors, or societal expectations that feel imposed rather than chosen, a sense of disempowerment can take root. This erosion of personal agency can lead to a withdrawal of voluntary effort. If one feels like a cog in a machine, with little say in the direction or nature of their work, the internal drive to excel or even to simply complete tasks can wane considerably. Imagine an employee whose daily tasks are meticulously prescribed, with no room for creativity or independent problem solving. Over time, this lack of control can breed a passive resistance, a feeling that effort is ultimately meaningless because the outcome is predetermined by others. This isn't about shirking work, it's a natural human response to feeling like a puppet rather than a pilot of one's own actions. Building on this, however, let's explore the intricate role of uncertainty in reward structures. Humans are, by nature, driven by feedback and the anticipation of positive reinforcement. When the connection between effort and reward is unclear, inconsistent, or delayed indefinitely, motivation can falter. Think about a student working diligently on a long-term research project. If the feedback loop is weak, perhaps infrequent grading, vague comments, or no clear indication of how their work is progressing towards a final evaluation, the incentive to maintain consistent effort can diminish. The absence of visible markers of progress or tangible acknowledgement of their diligence can make the endeavor feel like a solitary journey into the void. This ambiguity surrounding the payoff for exertion creates a fertile ground for procrastination, as the perceived benefit of sustained effort becomes increasingly abstract and, therefore, less compelling. Conversely, consider the impact of cognitive friction introduced by overly complex systems or processes. In many modern workplaces and even in personal endeavors, We are often required to navigate intricate software, convoluted bureaucratic procedures, or multi-layered decision-making frameworks. The mental energy expended simply in understanding and complying with these complex systems can be exhausting. Imagine trying to submit a simple expense report that requires navigating a dozen different forms, online portals, and approval chains. The sheer cognitive load involved in simply initiating the task can be so daunting that it leads to postponement. This isn't a lack of willingness to be reimbursed, it's a natural reaction to an unnecessarily burdensome process that drains the very energy required to complete it. The friction inherent in the system itself becomes a significant barrier, often overshadowing the intrinsic value or necessity of the task. Another crucial layer is the effect of fragmented attention due to constant context switching. In today's environment, many individuals are required to juggle multiple projects, respond to numerous communication channels, and pivot rapidly between different types of tasks. This constant context switching, while seemingly indicative of productivity, can actually be deeply detrimental to sustained engagement. Each shift requires a mental recalibration, a redirection of focus that consumes valuable cognitive resources. Consider a professional who spends their day responding to emails, attending virtual meetings, and then attempting to draft a strategic proposal. The mental whiplash of moving from one demand to another can leave their cognitive faculties depleted, making it incredibly difficult to dive deeply into any single task. This fragmentation of attention creates a superficial engagement with multiple things, but often at the expense of deep, meaningful progress on any one. The mind, perpetually interrupted, struggles to achieve the focused immersion necessary for challenging work. Now, consider how the architectural design of our immediate surroundings can subtly influence our propensity for action, often in ways we don't consciously register. The physical spaces we inhabit, our homes, our workspaces, even the layout of a public library, are not merely containers for our activities, but active participants in shaping our behavior. A cluttered, disorganized workspace, for instance, can create a subconscious sense of overwhelm, making the prospect of tackling a task feel like navigating a labyrinth. Conversely, a thoughtfully organized environment, with clear visual cues and designated areas for specific activities, can foster a sense of calm and focus, thereby lowering the activation energy required to begin. Think about the simple act of preparing a workspace for a specific task. Laying out materials, clearing distractions, and creating a visually ordered space can, in itself, be a powerful psychological cue, signaling to the brain that it is time to engage. This isn't just about aesthetics, it's about the subtle psychological impact of our physical reality on our internal state and, consequently, our readiness to act. Furthermore, let's delve into the impact of unaddressed sensory overload or deprivation. Our nervous systems are finely tuned to process a constant stream of sensory input, and disruptions to this balance can significantly affect our capacity for sustained focus. Consider the individual working in an environment with constant, jarring fluorescent lighting and a persistent, low-level hum from machinery. This persistent, unmanaged sensory input can create a background level of stress and distraction, making it incredibly difficult to sink into deep, focused work. The brain is perpetually engaged in a low-level battle against these intrusive stimuli, leaving fewer resources available for the task at hand. Conversely, an environment that is too sterile or devoid of stimulation can also be problematic, leading to boredom and a wandering mind. The optimal environment often strikes a balance, providing enough sensory engagement to keep the mind alert without overwhelming it, thereby facilitating a state of focused attention. Building on this, however, it's crucial to examine the role of unfulfilled creative impulses. Humans possess an innate drive to create, to express themselves, and to leave their mark on the world. When these creative urges are stifled, whether by circumstance, self-doubt, or a lack of opportunity, a profound sense of dissatisfaction can emerge. This unmet need for creative expression can manifest as a generalized apathy or a reluctance to engage in tasks that feel purely utilitarian or devoid of personal meaning. Imagine an individual who has a passion for painting but is currently working in a highly analytical, data-driven field. The lack of an outlet for their creative energy can lead to a feeling of being drained and uninspired, making it difficult to muster enthusiasm for even mundane responsibilities. This isn't merely about leisure, it's about a fundamental human need for self-expression that, when unmet, can profoundly impact our overall driving motivation. Consequently, let's consider the impact of unresolved interpersonal conflicts or social anxieties. Our relationships and our sense of belonging play a critical role in our overall well-being and our capacity to engage with the world. When there are simmering tensions in our personal or professional lives, or when we experience significant social anxiety, these emotional burdens can become a significant drain on our mental resources. Imagine the weight of an ongoing disagreement with a close friend or family member. The mental energy spent replaying the conflict, worrying about its resolution, or avoiding interaction can consume a significant portion of our cognitive bandwidth, leaving less available for productive tasks. This isn't about being socially withdrawn, it's about the tangible energy cost of carrying unresolved interpersonal friction, which can subtly but powerfully undermine our ability to focus and act. Reflecting on this journey so far, we've navigated the intricate landscape of what we so readily dismiss as mere laziness. It's become evident that this simple label is a veil, obscuring a far more complex tapestry of human experience. As we've peeled back its layers, we've discovered not a singular defect, but a confluence of factors: the subtle erosion of our internal resources, the silent whispers of our unacknowledged anxieties, the environmental currents that either propel or impede us, and the profound impact of our deeply ingrained narratives. The patterns that emerge suggest that what appears as a simple lack of effort is often a sophisticated, albeit sometimes maladaptive, response to a multifaceted interplay of internal states and external conditions. It's as if we've been examining the surface ripples, only to find that the true currents lie much deeper, shaping the very way we interact with the demands placed upon us. The insights gathered suggest that our capacity for sustained engagement is not a static trait, but a dynamic equilibrium, constantly influenced by forces both within and around us. The energy required to initiate and maintain action is not an infinite wellspring, but a delicate system susceptible to depletion and disruption. The way we frame our challenges, the unmet needs that quietly shape our motivations, and the very structure of the environments we inhabit all contribute to the ebb and flow of our drive. It's as if we've been trying to steer a ship through shifting tides and unseen currents, often blaming the helmsman for the vessel's course, when the true architects of its movement are far more pervasive and subtle. As we pivot towards the final reflection, consider the cumulative effect of these interwoven threads. They converge to paint a picture not of inherent deficiency, but of a complex, responsive organism navigating a world that often fails to account for its intricate workings. The path forward, therefore, cannot be paved with simple admonishments or the forceful application of sheer will. Instead, it beckons us towards a more nuanced understanding, a deeper inquiry into the underlying conditions that shape our behavior. The insights we've explored collectively illuminate a more compassionate and effective approach, one that acknowledges the intricate dance between our internal landscape and the external world, preparing us for a more profound realization. What if the persistent whisper of laziness is not an accusation, but a signal, a complex, often misunderstood, beacon from within that points not to a moral failing, but to a deeper truth about our intricate human architecture? We have journeyed through the intricate web of factors that contribute to our moments of perceived inaction, moving beyond the simplistic binary of effort versus idleness. We've seen how decision fatigue can drain our reserves, how perfectionism can freeze us in our tracks, and how unarticulated emotional burdens can silently sap our vitality. The environment, the unmet needs, the very perception of time, all these have emerged not as excuses, but as crucial dimensions of our lived experience, shaping our capacity for engagement in ways we rarely acknowledge. This exploration has revealed that the inertia we sometimes feel is not devoid of will, but a complex echo of our internal and external realities, a testament to the subtle, persistent forces that shape our every inclination. The profound implication of this understanding is a radical reorientation of how we view ourselves and our struggles. Instead of viewing an action as a personal defect to be conquered through sheer force of will, we can begin to see it as an invitation to inquiry. It's an invitation to listen more deeply to the messages our bodies and minds are sending, to understand the conditions that foster our ability to act, and to cultivate environments that nurture our focus and our energy. This is not about absolution, but about agency. It's about recognizing that by understanding the intricate interplay of factors that influence or drive, we gain the power to shape those factors, to create the conditions for more consistent, meaningful engagement. The journey from perceived laziness to empowered action begins not with a demand for more effort, but with a deeper, more compassionate understanding of the self. The true practice begins now, not with a singular, decisive act, but with a gentle, persistent curiosity. It is in the quiet observation of our own patterns, in the patient exploration of our internal landscape, and in the conscious cultivation of environments that support our well-being and our aspirations. By reframing our understanding, we transform our approach. We move from self-recrimination to self-discovery, from a battle against our own perceived flaws to a partnership with our own intricate nature. The goal is not to eliminate moments of pause or reflection, for these too are vital parts of the human experience, but to ensure that these moments serve as genuine rest and recalibration, rather than as prisons of inertia. It is in this shift of perspective, this embrace of complexity, that we unlock the potential for a more sustained, authentic, and ultimately, more fulfilling engagement with the world and with ourselves.